Welcome to the deep dive. This is the place where we sift through all that noise, we look closely at the source material, and basically hand you the intellectual shortcuts you need to understand what's coming tomorrow.
That's right.
And if you feel right now maybe a bit like you're holding a winning lottery ticket, but at the same time you can sort of hear these distant grinding gears of historical gravity turning, well, you're probably perfectly tuned into this exact moment.
Yeah, that tension, it's palpable, isn't it? The dizzying speed of what technology could do, colliding head on with the, let's call it, inertial drag of our established
Yeah.
systems, that's really our focus today.
Right.
We spent a lot of time synthesizing a pretty deep stack of analyses, specifically ones that critically compare this current AI boom to the late 1990s internet gold rush.
The dot-com bubble.
Exactly. And the goal here isn't just more breathless optimism. It's about understanding the kind of discipline required to actually navigate and, frankly, survive the inevitable correction that history tells us is coming.
Okay, so that's the core tension we really need to unpack today. It feels like we're living through two revolutions at the exact same time, and maybe they're fundamentally opposed.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
One is obviously technological, right? Powered by AI. And it seems to carry this profound promise of almost infinite abundance, near zero marginal cost for things like intelligence, creativity.
Things that used to be inherently scarce.
Precisely. But then the other revolution is institutional. It feels like a massive reckoning is coming for our deeply entrenched systems, economic, legal, political systems that seem fundamentally, historically, structurally built on the assumption that things are scarce.
And to really ground this pretty ambitious comparison, the source material we looked at keeps coming back to probably the most iconic, maybe even absurd failure of that last tech boom, Pets.com. Remember the sock puppet?
Oh, vividly. Hard to forget.
Right. So we're going to use that story, that sort of cautionary tale, to try and predict the shape, the form, and function of what people are already starting to call the coming Pets.AI crash.
Pets.AI, okay.
And then from there, we'll explore that deeper, really profound structural clash between AI's sheer capacity for abundance and how our current world operating system seems utterly dependent on scarcity.
Okay, so our mission today, listener, is essentially to give you the blueprint. That's what we're trying to do here.
Just a roadmap.
We want to help you extract the kind of discipline, the thinking that's required for genuine, long-term success in this AI era. Because it really feels like we need to meticulously separate the actual enduring technological platform shift.
Which some sources are calling like a new global nervous system.
Exactly. Separate that from all the surrounding froth. The financial speculation, the marketing hype, the stuff that history just screams at us will absolutely dissolve when reality bites.
It always does. So maybe the best place to start is just, let's fire up the time machine, right? Let's go back and really think about the late 1990s internet.
Okay.
Because it was unquestionably real.
Yeah.
The shift was happening. But the sheer speed of adoption, it just drove this mania.
What did that timeline look like again? It was fast.
Incredibly fast. By, say, 1994, email was already becoming a common reality, at least in universities, and for early tech adopters.
Right.
By 1996, we had rudimentary search engines trying to organize the chaos of the early web. Alta Vista, anyone.
Yeah, faint memory.
And then crucially, by 1998, I mean, this is just 4 years later,
Yeah.
we saw the birth of genuine giants. Companies like Amazon, like Google, were founded.
Titans, basically, formed in that crucible.
Absolutely. And by 1999, e-commerce wasn't just a theory, it was exploding. People were actually buying things online, lots of things.
So you're talking about an astonishingly rapid, really profound shift in communication and commerce, all happening in, 5 or 6 years?
Exactly. But as the analysis constantly reminds us, that underlying reality quickly got warped into pure mania.
How so?
Well, you suddenly had companies everywhere with basically zero revenue. Sometimes not even a real product, but they had massive market capitalizations just because they had .com in their name.
The infamous eyeball metrics.
Eyeballs over earnings, exactly. That reality, that disconnect, finally shattered around late 2000. By 2001, the NASDAQ crashed hard, taking literally thousands of these non-viable companies down with it. Wiped out.
Okay, so the key lesson then, looking back for today, isn't that the internet was some kind of hoax?
Absolutely not. It was profoundly real. The technology was sound.
The underlying infrastructure, you mean, like the protocols, the fiber optic cables that people laid?
All of that. The TCP/IP protocols, the actual fiber in the ground, the foundational capacity. It all remained. It was solid.
So what died?
What died were the thousands upon thousands of startups that fundamentally mistook a temporary speculative boom for a sustainable business model. They confused hype with economics.
But the internet itself.
The internet itself just kept going. It went on to basically conquer global commerce by, say, 2005, 2006. It absolutely defined the first quarter of the 21st century. The hype died spectacularly in 2001, but the technology persisted and reshaped everything.
Understanding that rhythm, then, the technology endures, the speculation corrects. That seems vital for navigating this AI era.
Okay, it's the core pattern.
So let's apply that. Let's unpack the AI platform shift now, because if the internet was mainly about enabling communication, connecting information, the sources we're looking at suggest AI is, well, a far more fundamental rewrite of reality.
That's the argument.
And I want to push back on that just a little. I mean, if AI is fundamentally just a faster, maybe smarter way to connect and process data, why isn't this just, the next logical step in the internet's evolution? Why call it a full-scale revolution, something fundamentally different?
And that's fair skepticism. It's a good question.
Yeah.
But the sources argue pretty strongly that the scope of the change, the kind of change, is different.
Okay.
The fundamental distinction they draw is this. The internet, primarily, was about connecting information.
Right.
Documents, links between them, the network structure itself, the topology.
And connecting to data.
Right. AI, however, is fundamentally about connecting and, crucially, creating intelligence, or maybe more accurately, cognitive ability.
Okay, connecting and creating intelligence. How does that subtle difference? How does it change the game so much?
Because it changes the actual physical constraints, or maybe the cognitive constraints of computing. You're not just accessing existing data faster. You are fundamentally transforming cognition itself, or at least automating it at scale.
So it's not just faster processing, it's a different kind of processing.
Exactly. The analyses we reviewed describe AI not merely as like a new feature set or a better application. They frame it as a platform shift on the scale of discovering a new type of electricity.
Wow, okay. Electricity level, that's a big claim.
It is. But think about it. A pervasive utility that fundamentally alters what computers are, what they can achieve autonomously, not just how we use them to look things up.
Okay, let's ground that huge claim in what's actually possible today.
Yeah.
We need to separate the sci-fi from the current reality.
Absolutely critical. And we have to be clear. AI can already perform tasks that, frankly, just a few years ago, required a decade or more of specialized human training.
Like what, specifically?
Well, we're talking about models right now that can write with human-level fluency, sometimes better. They can generate photorealistic images, increasingly video. They can interpret complex visual data from medical scans or satellite imagery.
Summarization, too, right? Taking huge documents.
Yeah, summarizing incredibly complex scientific texts, distilling the key findings accurately. They can reason through multi-step logic problems, translate dozens of languages pretty much instantly, and maybe most critically for the economy. They can rapidly generate, debug, and optimize complex software code.
That coding part feels huge. It's like the tools are starting to build themselves.
It's a major accelerant. And we need to be specific about this capability. It's not just, a fun chatbot function anymore. This intelligence is being embedded, woven into the foundational nervous system of modern society.
Where are we seeing that transition most clearly, from just being an application to becoming actual infrastructure?
Think about really specialized, high-value domains. Take healthcare. AI is moving rapidly past just simple data analysis. It's getting deep into diagnostics.
How so?
Well, it's not just, say, looking at a single X-ray anymore. It's analyzing millions of patient records, scans, genetic data simultaneously, spotting incredibly subtle disease patterns that even the best human doctor focused on one patient might completely miss.
That sounds like it could fundamentally accelerate things like drug discovery, personalized medicine.
It already is. Drug discovery is maybe a perfect example of a truly fundamental change, not just an efficiency gain.
Right. Because previously, that process involved years, decades sometimes, of physical lab work, animal testing, massive randomized human trials.
Hugely expensive, incredibly slow. Now, generative AI can simulate millions, even billions of molecular interactions virtually. It can predict protein folding, identify promising drug candidates, basically reducing the time from initial concept to a viable candidate from potentially a decade down to months.
That is a structural change in the economics of medicine itself. That's not just faster, that's different.
It's completely different. Or look at logistics, global supply chains.
Okay.
AI isn't just optimizing a few truck routes anymore. It's dynamically managing entire global supply chains in real time. It's predicting potential component shortages weeks or months in advance by analyzing thousands of data streams. It's autonomously rerouting container ships based on real-time weather patterns, port congestion, even geopolitical risks.
That level of complexity management was impossible before.
Impossible at that scale and speed. Or think about complex design processes, everything from, say, microchip layouts to aircraft engineering or even architecture. AI is increasingly acting as a genuine co-pilot, not just a simple CAD tool.
How does that work?
It can explore a design space, all the possible configurations and trade-offs, that is exponentially larger than any single human team could ever hope to manage or even conceive of. It finds novel solutions, optimizes for multiple constraints simultaneously.
Okay, so the capability is already quite profound in embedding itself, but the sources also emphasize that what we see now, the sort of generative layer, the LLMs everyone's playing with for text and images, that's really just the beginning, right? The starting gun.
Absolutely. That's the overwhelming consensus in the analysis. Where do they project this intelligence is going next?
Yeah.
The evolution seems incredibly rapid and points towards, well, true autonomy and much deeper systemic integration, meaning we're moving toward autonomous systems that can actually function, execute complex tasks without needing continuous human prompting or supervision. Think about AI agents that can run complex business processes end-to-end, interacting with other systems, making decisions.
Okay, so taking instructions and running with them independently.
Exactly. And we're already seeing the early but clear stages of multimodal reasoning.
Multimodal meaning combining different types of data.
Precisely. Systems that can seamlessly integrate sight, sound, text, maybe data from physical sensors all together to understand and interact with the physical world much more like a human brain does. Not just processing text, but seeing, hearing, reasoning across all those inputs.
And the ultimate goal, it sounds like, is this idea of embedded intelligence.
That seems to be the trajectory. Intelligence that is so deeply woven into the fabric of every device, every workflow, every building, every corner of the built environment, that it essentially becomes invisible. Like electricity today. You don't think about it, you just use it.
Which brings us back to your initial point about the scale of this change, the metaphor you mentioned.
Yeah, the sources really highlight the power of that metaphor. AI is not merely a new network like the internet was, connecting external points, documents, people.
Okay.
It is potentially a new nervous system, something that organizes, directs, coordinates, and transforms internal intelligence within systems, within organizations, maybe even within society itself.
So the internet provided the communication layer, the connections.
And AI has provided a cognitive layer.
Yeah.
The ability to think, reason, predict, create at scale using those connections.
Okay, I see the distinction now. If the internet made a lot of existing processes faster, more efficient, AI seems poised to redefine the core capabilities of the entities, the organizations, the systems performing those processes.
That's the heart of it. It's moving us from just external connectivity to internal, systemic, scalable intelligence.
And this profound nature, this almost civilizational scale shift. That's why some analyses are elevating the discussion beyond just, quarterly earnings reports or stock prices.
Exactly. There was one fascinating piece we synthesized that really leaned into the philosophical weight of this moment. It noted that this idea, this impending age of abundance, potentially facilitated by near infinite technological capacity, it actually echoes ancient prophecies across various cultures and traditions.
Prophecies about what?
About a major societal transformation, a fundamental shift out of material constraint, a kind of golden age enabled by, well, they wouldn't have called it AI, but by some profound leap in capability.
So it frames this current technological moment with a much deeper historical, maybe even spiritual context.
It adds that layer of gravity, yeah. It suggests we might be witnessing the sort of materialization of a long-hoped-for societal reset, but one enabled this time by silicon and code, not just faith.
That definitely adds weight to the euphoria, but it also underscores the stakes. Because even if the technology is this profound, history just screams at us that the road to adoption is littered with casualties, failures.
Always.
Which means we absolutely have to address the looming correction, the hype cycle. And to really understand that, the sources say we must start with the defining symbol, the cautionary icon of the last bubble. Pets.com.
Pets.com, yes. It remains this absolutely indispensable cautionary tale. Why? Because it perfectly, almost tragically, illustrates the kind of emotional and financial distortion that happens during a speculative bubble.
It was such a spectacular flameout.
Exactly, a spectacular failure that became the shorthand, the icon, for the entire dot-com crash.
Yeah.
And it's a story where a really deeply resonant cultural truth
What truth was that?
collided head-on with a massive technological opportunity, the internet. But the business model itself just completely failed to bridge that gap between the emotion and the economics.
Okay, let's focus on that cultural foundation for a second, because the sources argue this is crucial for understanding why the hype got so intense. You mentioned America's distinct sentiment towards pets.
Indeed. It's apparently more than just, simple affection. The analysis we read posits that certainly in the U.S., maybe more than other places, dogs and cats are viewed as integral members of the family, almost like furry children.
Yeah, that feels right. People spend fortunes on their pets.
Fortunes. And the idea of, say, animal consumption like eating dog meat is profoundly taboo here.
Yeah.
The metaphor one source used, which was striking, is that the dog is kind of the American cow, sacred. Not necessarily in a formal religious sense, but absolutely sacred in sentiment, untouchable. And Pets.com brilliantly, maybe cynically, tapped directly into this incredibly powerful emotional reservoir.
And that emotional truth, that love for pets, was leveraged perfectly by the timing, right? They launched in 1998.
Perfect timing. Their value proposition on the surface was incredibly appealing back then. Order all your pet supplies, food, litter, toys, everything online, and have it delivered straight to your door.
For busy, maybe affluent pet owners who were riding that late 90s economic boom, that sounded like pure convenience.
Convenience defined. So the period between, say, 1998 and early 2000 was just the perfect storm for them.
What were the ingredients?
Well, first, the pet industry itself was already massive and growing rapidly. Second, internet adoption was exploding, providing the necessary customer base online. And third, maybe most crucially, venture capital was flowing like an completely unrestrained river, funding practically any idea, no matter how flimsy, as long as it had a .com attached.
And Pets.com seemed to dominate the media landscape almost overnight.
They did. And their branding was, you have to admit, unforgettable.
The sock puppet.
The sock puppet. They had the cute, friendly logo, the super easy-to-remember domain name, Pets.com, and yes, the infamous sock puppet mascot.
That puppet was everywhere. Super Bowl ads, right?
Exactly. The sock puppet achieved peak cultural recognition, starring incredibly high-profile, very expensive marketing campaigns, including a Super Bowl commercial, which was unheard of for such a new company.
So they weren't just selling bags of kibble.
No. They were selling love. They were selling convenience. They were selling the status of being an early adopter in the digital age, all amplified by the gold rush fever of the .com era. It was, from a pure marketing perspective, genius.
Okay. Genius marketing. But here's where, as you said, the brilliance of the marketing just smashes head-on into the cold, hard logic of economics.
This is the collision point. The failure of Pets.com, let's be absolutely clear, was not a failure of branding. It wasn't a failure of the technology. The website worked. It was the moment when incredibly aggressive marketing spending irrevocably, fatally outran sustainable math. The numbers just didn't add up.
Okay, let's pull apart that math problem. Where exactly did the unit economics, as they say, completely fail?
Well, first, the sheer cost structure was just utterly unsustainable from day one. Pets.com reportedly spent upwards of $10, maybe $12 million just on marketing alone.
Including the Super Bowl spots.
Including the Super Bowl spots, yeah. Cross-country tours for the sock puppet mascot, high-profile celebrity endorsements, all before they'd even remotely proven they could achieve profitability on a single customer order, let alone overall. The upfront costs were astronomical.
But the real killer, the sources say, wasn't just the marketing spend. It was the logistics of the product itself.
Ah, yes. Which brings us back, inevitably, to those infamous 40-pound bags of dog food.
Right. Heavy, bulky.
Precisely. They were trying to build a national business, shipping bulk, heavy, relatively low-margin commodities across a massive geographic area, the entire United States.
And they weren't even charging a premium for this, were they?
Quite the opposite. They were often selling these heavy goods at prices below what a local physical pet store charged. Then they layered on deep discounts for first-time buyers to acquire customers. And the absolute killer, free or heavily subsidized delivery.
Okay, hold on. Let's just try and crunch the numbers theoretically for a second. Let's say you sell a $40 bag of premium dog food.
Okay.
And maybe your gross profit margin on that before shipping is pretty thin, say 10%. That's $4 profit.
Right, maybe.
But then the actual delivery and logistics cost for you to ship that awkward, heavy 40-pound bag across 3 states costs you, say, $12.
Easily. Maybe more back then.
So you are losing $8 on every single transaction right out the gate. And that's before you even account for the millions spent on marketing, website maintenance, customer service, all the overhead.
That is the perfect, brutal summary of the Pets.com business model.
So the more successful they were at selling dog food,
The faster they burned through their investors' cash. They were literally hemorrhaging money with every single shipment that went out the door.
But wait, in that late 90s boom atmosphere, how was this not seen as a massive red flag? Losing money on every sale.
Because, and this is crucial to understanding the mania, in the feverish atmosphere of the late boom, this wasn't necessarily seen as a fatal defect. For a while, it was almost spun as a feature.
Oh.
The metrics that mattered to investors back then were utterly distorted. People were prioritizing things like market share growth and website eyeballs, raw traffic over actual positive cash flow or earnings per share.
Growth at any cost.
That became the unquestioned mantra. Grab market share now, figure out profitability later. Maybe. The assumption was that once you owned the market, you could raise prices or find efficiencies. But for low-margin bulk goods, that was a fantasy.
I remember one analysis pointing out the sheer absurdity of spending millions of dollars to advertise a sock puppet. Selling heavily subsidized dog food during the Super Bowl, arguably the single most expensive advertising platform on the planet.
It's the perfect microcosm of the mania, isn't it? Just completely disconnected financial thinking.
It really is. It's the epitome. So what happened?
While Pets.com went public in February 2000, they raised massive sums of money, right at the absolute apex of the bubble's hype.
And then?
9 months later, just 9 months, by November 2000, the company was bankrupt, completely out of cash, done.
Wow, 9 months from IPO to bankruptcy.
The stock collapsed from its IPO price of $11 a share down to like 22 cents before trading was halted. Worthless. The sock puppet, despite being arguably one of the most recognized brand icons in America at that moment, was permanently silenced. It instantly became cultural shorthand for reckless.com overspending and failure.
Okay, so the deep, essential lesson from Pets.com, the one we need to carry forward into the AI discussion, is crystal clear then.
What would you say it is?
The fundamental failure was mistaking a deep cultural connection, America's love for pets, and a genuine technological opportunity, the internet, for a sustainable economic model.
Precisely.
You simply cannot overcome brutal logistics and perpetual financial losses with just slick branding, a cute mascot, and massive customer affection, no matter how real that affection is. Business fundamentals, the basic math, always eventually exude their gravitational pull.
Always. And that brings us perfectly, maybe ominously, to the present day.
Yeah.
Because, as the saying goes, history rarely repeats itself exactly.
But it absolutely rhymes.
It rhymes powerfully. And the key buzzword, the suffix that attracted those torrents of unquestioning capital back in 1999, the .com, seems to have been cleanly and efficiently replaced by the 2 letters, or maybe 3 if you count the dot, that attract capital in 2024, 2025.
Right. AI is the new .com. So we are, it seems, officially entering the Pets.AI era.
That's the term the sources are using.
And this term, Pets.AI, as the sources predict, is likely to become the universal shorthand, maybe the cautionary label, for those ventures, those startups, that are primarily chasing venture capital funding and media attention purely because they contain that magical phrase AI somewhere in their pitch deck.
Yeah, companies promising AI for everything, applying it superficially, maybe without a clear, profitable path to solving a genuine, difficult problem for which AI is the necessary solution.
Okay, so if this rhyming pattern holds, we can probably anticipate a strikingly predictable cycle, one that mirrors what happened in the early 2000s after the dot-com crash.
The analysts think so. We should expect to see many of these, let's call them Pets.AI companies, raise truly astronomical sums of money, hundreds of millions, maybe even billions in some cases, often based primarily on slick, perhaps viral demonstrations.
Demos that look incredible on social media, generate buzz.
Exactly. Demos that attract massive media attention and FOMO, fear of missing out from investors. But
the underlying business isn't sound.
right. And the prediction is that many, perhaps even most, of these highly funded pets, AI ventures will simply vanish or be forced into severe restructuring or fire sales within, say, the next 18 to 36 months.
A fairly short fuse, then.
Relatively short, yeah. Which means, for the broader market and for people working in tech, we should probably prepare for the inevitable drama that follows.
What kind of drama?
Painful mini-crashes in specific AI subsectors. Severe rounds of layoffs that will likely hit the tech sector quite hard again. Frantic rebrandings as companies desperately try to shed that AI for AI's sake stigma and appear more grounded.
And pivots, right. desperate pivots away from their initial, perhaps overly ambitious or unprofitable concepts towards anything that might show a flicker of revenue.
All of the above. And then, inevitably, just like after 2001, the same narrative will likely surface again in the financial press.
It should.
Investors and maybe reporters, often the very same ones who fueled the preceding boom, will suddenly turn pessimistic and start declaring an AI winter. You'll hear that phrase a lot.
Implying the whole field is cooling off, maybe it was all hype.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial insight from the Pets.com analogy, if we look past the short-term financial market gyrations, if we focus instead on the fundamental technology that platform shift toward intelligence we discussed, then this coming correction is not really a failure of AI itself.
It's more like necessary pruning.
That's a great way to put it. It's a necessary, sometimes painful pruning of the dead wood, clearing out the unsustainable hype to allow the truly strong, viable platforms and applications to actually flourish in the long run.
Because the underlying technology, the core ability of these models to generate text, reason about data, write code, the fundamental capability won't just disappear when the funding dries up for the weaker players.
Absolutely not. Just as the internet protocols, the fiber optic cables, the very concept of networked information didn't die in 2001, the core AI capabilities won't die in this correction either.
Okay, so if the tech itself persists, then the absolute essential question for anyone building in the space or investing or even just trying to navigate their career is, what are the enduring fundamentals? What kind of companies will survive this inevitable purge and potentially become the next generation of giants, the Googles and Amazons of the AI era?
Right, and the winners, according to the consensus in these analyses, will likely succeed for the exact same timeless reasons that the long-term platform winners of the last era you mentioned, Google, Amazon, maybe Apple, Microsoft, survived the dot-com crash and thrived afterwards.
What are those timeless reasons?
Rigorous product market fit, meaning they're solving a real painful problem for a customer who is willing to pay for the solution. Sustainable unit economics, they actually make money or have a clear path to making money on each customer or transaction.
Not just burning cash indefinitely.
No. High adaptability, especially important AI where models and capabilities are evolving so fast. And maybe, above all, just flawless, relentless execution. Having a great idea isn't enough. You have to build it, deliver it, support it better than anyone else.
Okay, let's try and define what that kind of success looks like, specifically in this AI context. It has to be about creating clear, ideally quantifiable value, right?
Absolutely. The winning companies, the ones that survive and thrive, will almost certainly be those building tools or platforms that demonstrably, number one, save enterprises significant time or money by reducing costs or automating workflows.
Okay, cost savings.
Number two, drastically improve mission-critical decisions. Think financial modeling, medical diagnostics, risk assessment.
Better outcomes.
Or number three, create entirely new forms of human joy, creativity, or capability that people genuinely value. It must be rooted in measurable impact, not just novelty.
And conversely, the Pets.AI ventures, the ones likely to fail, what will characterize them?
They will typically be building what some sources call glossy AI wrappers.
AI wrappers, meaning?
Basically taking an existing process or a thin idea, wrapping it in a layer of expensive AI compute, maybe using an off-the-shelf API, adding some clever marketing, but ultimately failing to deeply integrate into essential customer workflows or provide a clear, defensible path to profitability.
So they're using the AI label more as a justification for raising capital or for marketing buzz, rather than using AI as the core, indispensable engine for creating unique value.
That's the danger zone, AI for AI's sake, or AI because it attracts funding. That's the Pets.AI trap.
Okay. And this distinction leads us then to what the sources call the real, quiet story of AI's persistence, the story that often gets missed during the noisy bubble years.
Right, because once the hype inevitably cools, once the easy venture capital retreats, the true, profound revolution, the actual integration of AI will just continue quietly but steadily.
How will that look?
It's the almost invisible, gradual embedding of these AI capabilities into practically every device we use, every piece of software, every business workflow, every piece of critical infrastructure, and every organizational decision-making process. It becomes part of the fabric.
So the correction, the crash, far from being the end of the AI story.
It actually marks the moment the AI revolution begins to achieve maturity. It moves from speculative frenzy to practical deployment.
We saw this exact pattern after 2001, didn't we? The market sobered up, returned to Demanding discipline, real revenue, real profits.
Exactly. And arguably, the real internet gold rush, the one that created lasting value and the giants we know today, began after the 2001 crash, rewarding solid execution over just pure optimism.
So the sources suggest that the next Google, the next Amazon, the next Salesforce of the AI era, it's quite likely being built right now, maybe quietly, maybe bootstrapped.
Maybe focusing heads down on disciplined deployment, solving a hard problem far away from the media spotlight that's currently fixated on these massive, often overinflated seed rounds and flashy demos.
Okay. That makes sense for the application layer, the software, the business models built on top of AI. But to power all this immense intelligence, we have to talk about the physical reality underneath it all.
The picks and shovels.
Exactly, because we are undeniably in the middle of a massive physical build-out right now. An AI infrastructure arms race that seems to be dwarfing almost any previous industrial undertaking in speed and scale.
Oh, that's absolutely the truth. And the scale of this arms race is staggeringly physical. It's not just code. We're seeing the major tech giants, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, OpenAI ordering millions, literally millions, of the most advanced GPUs,
The NVIDIA H100s, the upcoming B200s, Google's own TPUs.
all being bought in massive, multi-billion-dollar pre-orders that stretch years into the future. They're trying to corner the supply of compute power.
And it's not just chips, right? It's the buildings themselves, data centers.
Data centers are expanding like entirely new, autonomously growing cities. They're rapidly consuming huge tracts of land, requiring specialized construction, massive cooling systems.
And driving a corresponding absolutely immense spike in global electricity demand.
Huge spike. This is already becoming a major operational constraint, even a political issue, for utility companies in hotspots like Northern Virginia,
Yeah.
Georgia, parts of Silicon Valley. They literally can't supply power fast enough for all the planned data centers.
And crucially, as the sources point out, this isn't just a corporate arms race between tech giants anymore.
No, it's gone geopolitical. We are witnessing this clear imperative for nations to establish what they're calling sovereign compute.
Sovereign compute.
Basically, countries are pouring tens of billions of dollars national funds into building their own dedicated, state-controlled reserves of foundational AI compute power. They see access to large-scale training clusters as the new strategic resource for the 21st century.
Equivalent to how nations viewed oil reserves or nuclear technology in the 20th century.
Precisely that level of strategic importance, and the scale of this investment, happening quarterly now, is just unprecedented outside of perhaps wartime mobilization.
Okay, so massive build-out. But to the critical observer, especially maybe someone who lived through, say, the fiber optic glut of the early 2000s.
They're having déjà vu.
Exactly. This looks suspiciously like classic overbuilding. They point to signs of short-term saturation already appearing.
What kind of signs?
Things like reports of massive, extremely expensive GPU clusters sitting idle for significant portions of the day because the software or the workloads aren't ready yet. Large language models that are only half-trained, waiting for refinement or more data, power-hungry servers running well below maximum utilization because the demand hasn't fully caught up to the supply yet.
Okay, so they see a potential short-term glut forming, just like with dark fiber back then.
Right, a classic bubble field oversupply about to hit.
And that suspicion, it's based on valid historical precedent, absolutely. But the sources we're analyzing argue pretty strongly that this is likely a misdiagnosis of the current need, or rather the future need, for AI compute.
Okay, how so? Let's revisit that fiber optic analogy from 2000 because it's key.
Right. That initial internet boom, fueled by similar hype, resulted in a truly massive overbuilding of physical fiber optic cable capacity. Billions were spent laying cables under streets, across oceans.
Creating huge amounts of what they called dark fiber installed but unused capacity.
Exactly. Far too much physical bandwidth for the relatively small number of internet users,
Mhm.
and the low data demands mostly text and small images at the time.
So critics back in 2001, they looked at all that unused capacity, those billions of dollars sunk into cables just lying dormant under the ground and oceans.
And they called it a total permanent waste of capital, a monumental blunder driven by hype.
What actually happened over the next decade, say leading up to 2010?
Well, that supposed excess capacity, that glut of dark fiber, very quickly became woefully, even tragically, insufficient for the explosive demands that nobody foresaw in 2001.
Demands driven by what?
Driven by the unexpected rise of cloud computing, which requires massive data centers. Driven by platforms like YouTube, demanding huge amounts of bandwidth for HD video streaming. The shift to software as a service, SaaS, which needed constant low-latency data access. Smartphones generating torrents of mobile data.
All things unimaginable to most people back when the fiber was being laid.
Absolutely. That glut was completely erased, and companies had to scramble to constantly light up more fiber and build even more capacity throughout the 2010s. The overbuilding turned out to be critical foresight.
Okay, so the argument is that today's perceived AI glut, this maybe temporary lull between building the massive compute capability and discovering the truly transformative compute-hungry applications that will fully utilize that power, it's facing the exact same potential misdiagnosis.
That's the core argument. We might be confusing the current utilization rate, which might seem low in places, with the eventual future need, which could be orders of magnitude higher than we can currently conceive.
So just like dark fiber seemed excessive until YouTube arrived.
Precisely. The sources predict that today's AI compute glut, which currently appears as maybe short-term saturation in some areas, will likely look tragically inadequate by the time the real demands of the 2030s arrive.
And what might drive those future demands?
Things like truly autonomous systems operating everywhere, requiring constant real-time multimodal reasoning, pervasive embedded intelligence in billions of devices across every sector, all communicating and learning, scientific discovery platforms running simulations at scales we can't imagine today. The argument is we haven't even scratched the surface of what we'll want AI to do once the capacity is truly there and affordable.
So the risk is mistaking this short-term saturation, this gap between build-out and full application, with long-term futility or waste.
Exactly. Underestimating the eventual demand curve seems like the bigger historical error here.
Okay, that structural risk underestimating the long-term demand for compute, that's one critical perspective.
Yeah.
But here is where the analysis we looked at really deepens, and it becomes, frankly, more philosophical, moving beyond just the physical components like chips and data centers.
Right. It shifts from the how much to the what for.
Precisely. The analysis argues that the real risk we face isn't actually overbuilding AI capacity. We'll probably need all of it and more.
So what is the real risk, according to this view?
It's fundamentally underthinking what AI actually means for civilization itself.
Underthinking its implications.
Yeah. We are building this massive, world-altering power, potentially a new cognitive system for the entire planet. But we're doing it largely without a corresponding well-thought-out philosophy or ethical framework, or even a clear political purpose to guide its deployment and manage its consequences. We're asking, how fast can we build the engine?
But we're not asking nearly enough, where are we actually trying to steer this incredibly powerful vehicle?
Yeah.
Or even, should we be building this engine in this way at all?
And that philosophical deficit, that lack of a deeper why, that sets the stage for what the sources describe as the deepest, most fundamental collision we face today. We've established the technological revolution, the potential for abundance, but now we have to directly address the massive friction this creates with the existing institutional world, which, as we said, still seems to be running entirely on the logic of scarcity.
Okay, let's be really clear about the foundation of our current global operating system, this scarcity framework.
Right. Historically, I mean, from the agricultural revolution through the entire industrial age and even deep into the early digital age, economics, political power, social structures, they were all predicated on fundamental limitations.
Absolutely. Goods were finite, resources were finite, labor, skilled labor especially, was a scarce and valuable commodity. Information itself was costly and difficult to transmit accurately and replicate widely.
And so value in that world was created and wealth was accumulated by efficiently managing or controlling or rationing that inherent scarcity.
Exactly. Capital got invested in machines primarily to make the scarce resource of human labor more productive. Governments structured trade policies based on the movement of limited physical goods across borders. Ownership was defined by excluding others from scarce resources.
Scarcity was the default assumption underlying almost everything.
It was the water we swam in. But AI, or at least the promise of advanced AI, fundamentally inverts this core logic.
Yeah.
It doesn't just manage scarcity a bit better. In key domains, it potentially obliterates it.
Obliterate scarcity.
By promising near-infinite reproducibility and near-zero marginal cost for things that absolutely define the 20th century economy and were previously inherently scarce.
Like what?
Like sophisticated knowledge work, complex intellectual property creation, high-end design and engineering, human-level computation, analysis, and even certain forms of creativity. Once an AI model can do these things, it can potentially do them millions of times over at negligible extra cost.
Okay, so if the cost of producing intelligence or design or analysis drops towards zero, that changes the fundamental economic questions we ask.
Completely.
Yeah.
We are potentially moving from a world where the primary economic question was, how do we produce more goods and services efficiently given our limited resources?
Right, the core question of industrial economics.
Towards a world where the question becomes, what happens to our systems of value, ownership, labor, and distribution when production itself is no longer the primary constraint, when intelligence and creation become abundant?
That is a profoundly different question, and that leads directly to this concept of the institutional mismatch.
This is the crux of the collision. We are sinking trillions of dollars globally into building abundance infrastructure. These millions of GPUs, massive data centers, foundation models capable of generating near-infinite intelligence and content.
Okay, the abundance engine.
But we are attempting to deploy this abundance engine within a set of deeply entrenched scarcity institutions.
Meaning our existing legal systems, political structures, economic models.
Exactly. All of which are structurally, fundamentally dependent on limitation, on scarcity, to even function according to their current rules.
Yeah.
They weren't designed for a world of digital abundance.
Can you give an analogy? It feels like.
It feels like trying to run a modern high-speed fiber optic internet network using the control systems of a 1950s rotary telephone switchboard,
Okay.
and maybe billing customers by the minute based on the physical distance the data travels. The underlying technology is completely mismatched with the operational and economic logic being applied to it.
So we're treating AI in many ways like just another commodity market. We trade compute cycles, we buy chips, we sell access to models via cloud credits.
Exactly. Which, according to the sources we looked at, is fundamentally misunderstanding the nature of the shift. It's missing the forest for the trees.
How so?
Treating AI like just another commodity market like oil or wheat is akin to how people in the very early days treated the internet as merely a slightly faster upgrade to the existing phone lines or fax machines.
Right, they miss the bigger picture.
They completely missed that the true value, the revolution, wasn't just in the physical pipe, the phone line, or the fiber cable. It was in the total cognitive and social transformation that the network enabled: global communication, e-commerce, social media, etc.
So our current systems are too focused on the pipe, the GPUs, the compute.
While the actual transformation, the explosion of accessible intelligence, is already starting to render those scarcity-based systems and metrics obsolete, we're measuring the wrong thing.
Okay. If we accept this fundamental mismatch between abundance tech and scarcity institutions, then the real AI glut we talked about earlier, the one critics worry about, it takes on a completely new and maybe more worrying definition.
How do you mean?
It suggests the real glut won't actually manifest as, like, warehouses full of physically idle servers or unsold chips.
Okay, so what will it look like?
It will look like blocked potential, an invisible systemic choke point caused by sheer institutional rigidity.
Block potential. Unpack that a bit.
It means we will likely have access, technologically, to exponentially more intelligence, more automation capability, more creative potential, more processed data than our existing legal, economic, and social systems can actually process, value, distribute, or utilize effectively.
So the technology will be capable, but the systems won't be able to absorb it.
Exactly. We could easily see a scenario, maybe not too far off, where multi-billion-dollar AI data centers are technically running at only 50% capacity, not because of lack of demand, but because the outputs can't be integrated, while at the same time, massive populations remain unemployed, underemployed, or unable to access the benefits of this AI.
A paradox of simultaneous technological abundance and societal scarcity.
Precisely. And the root cause of that stagnation, that frustrating paradox, won't be a lack of AI capability. The models will be powerful enough. The bottleneck will be pure institutional friction.
Laws around intellectual property, labor market structures, regulatory bodies struggling to keep up, corporate governance models focused on short-term profits, education systems lagging behind.
All failing to adapt quickly enough to let the potential benefits of this technological abundance actually flow freely and equitably into the broader economy and society.
And that fundamental mismatch, that blocked potential, it will be measured and felt and probably reported by traditional metrics as an economic oversupply, a glut, a downturn.
But the real diagnosis, according to this analysis, is a profound failure of imagination and institutional structure. We built the engine, but forgot to redesign the car around it.
And the global economy, as it stands today, still largely runs on the old clockwork of scarcity economics. That's undeniable.
Scarcity is what justifies so many things we take for granted.
Right. It's what underpins traditional banking practices like interest rates. It's what gives fiat money its perceived worth because it's limited. It's what gives traditional jobs their social necessity and value. It's what grants governments their traditional methods of control and taxation based on tangible goods and limited services.
And AI, by potentially making intelligence and creation infinitely reproducible at near zero cost, directly threatens that fundamental scaffolding.
It really does. When key inputs like intelligence, design, analysis, and creativity become effectively abundant, traditional notions of economic value, ownership, and control start to fracture, maybe irrevocably.
Therefore, this logic of scarcity, which is just so deeply rooted in literally every political and economic system humans have built over centuries, it's not going to surrender easily, is it?
Not without a fight. It underpins taxation structures. How do you tax something infinitely reproducible? It underpins intellectual property laws. Who owns an idea generated by an AI trained on public data? It underpins corporate hierarchies and wage structures. It underpins political power distribution.
So this collision between AI's abundance and our scarcity systems, it's really scarcity's final, maybe desperate battle for continued relevance in a world it wasn't designed for.
That's a powerful way to frame it. It feels like the last stand of the old operating system.
Okay, let's get really specific then. Where are we seeing the most acute examples of this institutional resistance, this mismatch, playing out right now? Let's start with education.
Education is a perfect, maybe painful example. The current system, pretty much globally, is overwhelmingly designed around rationing learning.
Oh, so rationing.
Through expensive, time-bound degrees that act as credentials, through standardized fixed curricula delivered cohort by cohort, through geographically constrained physical classrooms and limited teacher availability. The whole model creates artificial scarcity of access to knowledge and, critically, to certification.
Right. It's inherently exclusive in many ways.
So the AI today is already capable technologically of providing truly individualized, personalized one-on-one tutoring, tailored perfectly to the cognitive pace, learning style, interests of every single student on the planet, potentially 247, regardless of their location or economic background.
The potential for abundance in learning is staggering.
It's almost infinite. But the existing institutional rigidity, the accreditation bodies, the university tenure processes, the reliance on standardized testing for ranking, the very structure of schools acts as a massive brake, preventing the full deployment and societal benefit of this abundant teaching power. The old system resists the new capability.
Okay, education is one clear friction point. Let's shift to labor and economics. This feels like perhaps the most painful, most immediate point of friction for many people.
Absolutely. Our entire societal concept of individual identity, social safety nets, healthcare access, basic income status, it remains stubbornly institutionally tied to the necessity of having a traditional job.
Even as AI is rapidly starting to automate not just manual labor, but increasingly complex cognitive labor tasks previously thought safe from automation.
Exactly. Writing, coding, analysis, design, legal review, financial modeling, these are white-collar tasks being impacted now. And this deep institutional rigidity around the wage labor contract, the idea that income must come from a job, it ensures that when AI automates a task or even a whole role,
The productivity gains don't flow to everyone.
primarily no. The financial benefits, the productivity gains, are captured predominantly by the owners of the AI systems, the companies deploying them, and ultimately by their shareholders. They are not automatically distributed broadly to the society whose collective data trained the AI in the first place, or to the workers who might be displaced.
Which inevitably magnifies inequality, right? Because the job market as the primary distribution mechanism for wealth is failing to adapt to the technological reality of abundance, the reality of near zero marginal cost for certain kinds of labor.
Precisely. We are successfully automating labor, but we are completely failing institutionally to automate income or well-being. That's the dangerous gap.
And then let's look at the realm of governance and political power. How does scarcity logic play out there?
Well, the traditional political model, especially in more authoritarian states, but even in democracies, often treats information as a highly centralized source of power and control. Knowledge is power, as they say.
If you control the flow of information, the official narrative, you can heavily influence or even control the population.
Exactly. Scarcity of trusted information or controlling the distribution channels has been a cornerstone of political power for centuries.
But AI seems poised to disrupt that fundamentally.
It does. Things like open source AI models, decentralized knowledge sharing systems, the sheer ability of almost anyone with a laptop and access to these tools to generate sophisticated analysis, critique official narratives, or create compelling counter-narratives. It's rapidly eroding the traditional gatekeeper's exclusivity over knowledge and influence.
So AI is making the forced centralization of knowledge potentially obsolete.
It's certainly making it much harder to maintain. And that is frankly terrifying for established power structures that rely on controlling the message. Information abundance challenges information control.
Okay, these specific examples, education, labor, politics, they all highlight the profound, maybe dangerous insufficiency of our existing governance structures to handle this transition.
Completely insufficient. The sources we looked at use the World Trade Organization, the WTO, as a kind of perfect case study of a major global governance structure that was designed for a world that basically no longer exists.
When was the WTO formed again?
It was formally established in 1995, right at the dawn of the commercial internet, but conceptually rooted in post-World War II thinking.
And what was its purpose?
It was designed primarily to manage global trade between nation-states, specifically concerning the rules, tariffs, and disputes related to the cross-border flow of physical goods, things like cars, grain, textiles, manufactured products.
A world of atoms, not bits.
Exactly. That entire framework, built around nations trading tangible stuff, feels laughably outdated, almost quaint, when arguably the primary drivers of global economic power and value creation today are increasingly non-physical, infinitely reproducible digital flows of data, services, and intelligence.
And it's not just the what that's changed, it's the who, right? The actors themselves.
Absolutely critical point. Power and economic productivity today aren't neatly confined within national borders anymore, nor are they solely wielded by governments.
We now have this handful of global, mostly non-state actors.
Right. Companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Amazon here in the West, Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu in China. These entities now wield technological capabilities, financial resources, and frankly, direct global influence that equals, and in some cases arguably exceeds, the GDP and the practical political leverage of many medium-sized nation-states.
They operate supranationally in many ways.
They do. Therefore, the sources argue, any attempt at a modern, effective global coordination system or governance framework for AI cannot simply be an agreement negotiated solely between countries, like the WTO model. It won't work.
What?
Because the most powerful players aren't all countries anymore. An effective system must, by necessity, include. We should anticipate, first and foremost, a veritable firestorm of legal battles. Complex, high-stakes litigation.
We're already seeing the start of this, aren't we?
We absolutely are. Major lawsuits are already underway concerning data access. Was the AI trained on copyrighted material without permission? Who actually owns the output generated by these models? If an AI creates a novel invention or writes a bestseller, who gets the rights?
The lawsuits brought by major content creators, publishers like the New York Times, artists, authors, against the big AI labs.
Those are landmark cases. They represent a direct fight between the old scarcity-based economy of controlled intellectual property, like newspaper articles or books, and the new abundance economy of generative intelligence that learns from everything. The legal system is the primary battlefield right now.
Okay, legal fights. What else? Political backlash.
Almost certainly. As AI automation starts to impact more jobs, especially white-collar jobs previously considered safe, we can expect significant political backlash. Increased pressure on governments for regulations designed explicitly to slow down the pace of AI deployment, often framed in the name of protecting human employment.
We might see heated debates around things like digital citizenship, what rights do AI systems have, or maybe renewed calls for universal basic income, UBI.
Exactly. As the traditional wage labor contract starts to fray or collapse for larger segments of the population, these fundamental questions about income distribution and social safety nets in an automated world will become unavoidable political flashpoints.
Okay, legal fights, political backlash. But the sources also mention something more insidious. The economic attempt by established players to remonetize abundance, to create artificial scarcity.
Yes, this is a critical concept to grasp. If the underlying technology naturally tends towards abundance, making intelligence cheap and reproducible to the most powerful incumbents, those who benefit from the old scarcity models, will inevitably try to impose artificial scarcity back onto the system through proprietary means.
Artificial scarcity. How exactly do you make something like digital intelligence, which can be copied infinitely, scarce again?
Primarily by building walled gardens around the interfaces, the data, and the most advanced capabilities, controlling access.
How does that manifest practically?
It manifests as increasingly expensive subscription tiers for access to the most capable, state-of-the-art AI models. It manifests as proprietary hardware, like specialized chips that might be designed to only run specific lockdown algorithms. It manifests as incredibly complex patent thickets around AI techniques, designed primarily to discourage or litigate against smaller competitors and open-source alternatives.
So they're essentially trying to turn general intelligence, which seems to be inherently tending towards becoming an abundant utility.
They're trying to turn it back into a limited, controllable, premium, revenue-generating commodity that they exclusively control.
We see this already with companies offering exclusive API access or charging exponential rates for fine-tuning models based on proprietary datasets they control, or keeping their most powerful models closed source.
Exactly. They are actively trying to create new forms of digital bottlenecks, new toll booths on the road to accessing advanced intelligence. They want to ensure that even if the base level of AI becomes relatively common and cheap, the application of the highest level, most impactful intelligence remains economically restricted, captured within their ecosystems.
So scarcity will eventually lose this fight, probably, because the fundamental nature of digital technology favors dissemination and cost reduction.
But the fight itself, the attempt to reimpose scarcity, will be prolonged, expensive, and potentially very chaotic for markets and society. It's a delaying action by the old guard.
Okay. This whole discussion, the technological potential, the institutional friction, the resistance, it brings us back to what the sources identify as the core investment gap that really defines our current moment.
Investment gap, meaning we're investing in the wrong things.
Or rather, an imbalance. We are investing truly staggering sums, trillions of dollars globally, when you add it all up into compute, into the physical infrastructure. The GPUs, the data centers, the power grid upgrades needed to run them, the how.
Okay, massive investment in the hardware.
But we are investing almost nothing, comparatively speaking, into philosophy, into defining the purpose, articulating the ethical frameworks, designing the new institutional models that we desperately need to manage this unprecedented abundance justly, safely, and effectively. The why and the what for.
So we're overwhelmingly focused on asking how much AI can we build and how fast can we build it?
Yes, that's the dominant question driving investment in engineering. But we are fundamentally failing, as a society, to ask the harder, more important questions with the same level of urgency and resources.
Questions like, what kind of world do we actually want to build with this incredibly powerful technology? Or how do we ensure its benefits are shared broadly? Or what are the failure modes we need to prevent?
Exactly. And that chasm, that gap between our rapidly accelerating technological capability and our lagging philosophical and institutional maturity, that is what will ultimately determine whether this AI revolution leads to some kind of collective human flourishing and awakening, or whether it results in massive, destabilizing imbalance, conflict, and potentially dystopian outcomes.
Because if we simply use this powerful AI to reinforce the existing scarcity-based systems, just making current corporations more profitable, current governments more powerful, current inequalities even wider,
Then AI doesn't become a tool for transformation, it becomes an accelerant for the status quo, amplifying all its flaws.
and the true winners of this emerging age, as the sources consistently emphasize, likely will not be those who simply own the most advanced GPUs or the largest datasets.
Who will the winners be then?
They will be those individuals, those organizations, maybe even those societies, who are able successfully to reimagine and then build the new systems of value, the new modes of governance, the new social contracts that can actually sustain this technological abundance for the benefit of all, not just a few. That's the real frontier.
That brings us towards the end of this deep dive journey then. Wow. We've covered a lot of ground. We use the historical rhyming of the Pets.com crash to try and predict the shape of the coming market correction for AI hype.
Yeah, the Pets.AI phenomena.
We defined AI not just as a tool, but potentially as a new global nervous system, a fundamental platform shift bigger than the internet.
A cognitive layer for the planet.
And then we spent a lot of time exploring what feels like the core conflict. This seismic clash between the technological promise of abundance and the deep entrenched institutional rigidity of our scarcity-based world?
The abundance engine meeting the scarcity framework.
Okay, so if we had to distill this down, what are the two main takeaways for you, the listener, trying to make sense of all this?
I think there are two key things: discipline and vision. First, discipline. The AI platform shift, the core technology, is profoundly real and it's enduring. It's not going away.
Yeah.
But you absolutely must prioritize financial discipline, finding genuine product market fit, proving viable unit economics, and focusing relentlessly on execution over just market dazzle or hype.
Basically, do whatever it takes to avoid becoming the next Pets.AI failure when the inevitable hype cycle corrects. Build a real business, not just a funding story.
Exactly. That's takeaway number one. Discipline amidst the hype.
Okay, and the second takeaway, vision.
Vision. Recognize that the truly long-term, maybe existential challenge we face is not ultimately a failure of the technology itself. AI will likely continue to get more powerful. The bigger risk is the failure of our institutions to adapt, that rigidity.
So the real AI glut, the real bottleneck we're going to face, will probably manifest as that blocked potential we discussed, having access to far too much intelligence and capability for systems that were only ever designed to manage constraint and lack.
Understanding that mismatch is key to seeing the bigger picture.
Okay. So what does the path forward look like? It sounds potentially chaotic.
I think the path forward is undeniably challenging, but also potentially incredibly creative. Those scarcity-based institutions we've talked about, things like traditional job structures or intellectual property laws based on physical limitations or purely nation-state-based governance, they will likely fade gradually or perhaps suddenly through sheer technological obsolescence.
As the abundance becomes just too undeniable to ignore.
Exactly. As the cost of intelligence drops, the old ways of controlling it just won't hold. And new systems that are likely more open, perhaps more decentralized, more participatory, designed explicitly to manage shared intelligence rather than restricted property. They will have to rise to fill the vacuum.
But that transition period.
That transition will almost certainly be messy, chaotic, contested. There will be resistance. But ultimately, it could be highly creative, forcing us to rethink fundamental assumptions about value, work, and society.
And the enduring truth. The final warning that echoes through all the source material we reviewed really comes back to that discipline point.
It does. The future, the lasting success in this era, will likely reward those who treat AI as fundamental infrastructure, like building roads or power grids or the internet itself. People focused on building durable value, serving real needs, solving deep, difficult, long-term problems.
And it will likely not reward those who treat AI as just a fleeting lottery ticket, something built purely on temporary market momentum, buzzwords, and speculative hype, hoping for a quick exit.
Right. The technology itself, the core AI capability, it won't die in the next market crash whenever it comes. It will simply integrate more deeply, assume its permanent, defining place in the landscape of the 21st century and beyond. The hype fades, the infrastructure remains.
Okay. So we always like to end with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, something to take away and mull over.
Right. Building on everything we've discussed, if the ultimate winners of this AI age will not be defined simply by who owns the most chips or the biggest models, but rather by who successfully reimagines and builds the new systems of value, the new forms of governance that can actually sustain and distribute this technological abundance.
Then here's the question for you to explore. What is the very first deeply entrenched, scarcity-based institution in your industry, in society, in your own life that you personally see starting to crack or collapse under the immense pressure of near infinite AI production capability?
And, maybe more importantly, what practical, realistic new framework, what new way of organizing or valuing things should begin to rise up to replace it? Not just critique the old, but envision the new.
Something to really think about as you navigate your own strategy, your own investments, your own career in this rapidly arriving age of potential abundance.